Good afternoon, everyone. I am Legita Wilson with the Indiana Department of Health WIC Division Commodities Programs, and I have the pleasure of introducing SHaron Pattee today, who's going to tell you about the new HPV law and provide you with some food safety tips. This is one of my favorite sessions at the forum, so I look forward to this every year. I'd like to remind everyone to please remain muted during the presentation, but because we want this to be participatory, if you have a question, please raise your little hand on screen and we'll call on you, or drop your questions into the chat and we'll have time for Q&A at the end. Also, toward the end of the presentation, there will be a link for the evaluation survey for this session. Please take a few minutes to complete that survey. It's very important to the conference planning committee to get your feedback. What can I tell you about SHaron Pattee? She is the State Trainer and Standardization Officer at the Indiana Department of Health in the Food Protection Division. SHaron began her career in public health at the Wabash County Health Department in 2004. Gaining opportunities, she has served as a retail food safety inspection officer in Grant, Boone, and Delaware counties before joining the Indiana Department of Health. In 2014, she became the state wholesale trainer at the IDOH, but returned to her retail roots as retail food specialist with the Food Protection Division in 2016. In January, she became Indiana's first state trainer and standardization officer for the Food Protection Division. SHaron graduated from Vincennes University in 1991. She currently seeks adventure in her hometown of La Fontaine, I probably murdered that pronunciation, in Wabash County, as a foster failure with her special needs American Bulldog Daisy and sassy Calico Scout. Her favorite pastimes include writing true crime, gardening, and joyriding with Miss Daisy. I hope that we get to hear a little bit about all of those as well. Take it away, SHaron.
Thank you for having me, guys. This is always something I look forward to each year, talking with the Farmers Market Forum, because it's like the kickoff for our great Indiana Farmers Market season. So it's a delight to have this opportunity. So thank you so much for allowing us to join you guys today. So some of you are new. I'm sure some of you have joined before. However, if you have any questions, just like make sure, to put them in the box, raise your hand, and we will answer them afterwards. Also, at the end, you'll have my information. I'm always I love answering farmers market questions. So I want to let you know, as this presentation will share, we are all about making sure that you feel confident and comfortable contacting your local health department or ourselves to get some answers. So as we move on, hold on, guys. Go forward, go backwards. Hold on. Move forward. Did I lock myself out? Oh, there we go. It's just too easy for me. Okay, guys. The State Department of Health, the Department of Health's mission is to promote, protect, and improve the health and safety of all Hoosiers. Every Hoosier to reach that optimal health, regardless whether they live, learn, work, or play. We want everybody to have health, be healthy, and have fun out there. So partnerships for healthy commercial communities. I have a lot of questions. I think a lot of the questions that come that I always really enjoy promoting is the fact that people get all worked up about why their inspectors are doing stuff, like weird stuff, like why is my inspector here? So why is the health department involved at the farmers market? Like, what are the different permits needed? Why do I need a permit? Why are there different rules in different communities? What's my inspector doing here once again? Is it required under Indiana state law or rule? Or are they just making this stuff up? And why does the health department have any right to regulate my family's business? Like, why? The whys drive me insane. I think they drive people. This morning I had a gentleman show up, and I just love answering those questions because, sometimes just talking it through helps relieve all our anxiety, and that helps just moving forward. So with the Indiana Health Departments, Indiana operates under home rule. We have 92 counties. We have 3 city health departments, the city of Fishers, East Chicago, city of Gary, which work along with Lake County up north. And then there's myself and our team here at the Indiana Department of Health. So we all have regulatory bodies. Indiana Department of Health issues guidance, and then the local health departments implement that. Now, we always try to be on the same page. That goal, wherever we are, we try to be our best. And so you can always ask for direction. Your local health department should always have guidance for you. Some of the concerns I hear a lot is like people are concerned that the health department's going to shut them down. Like they're just going to show up at the farmer's market and shut people down. They won't let us do what we want to do. My big dream's this. Contacting the health department will start worms. If they don't know it, then I'll just do it on the side. Different rules in different counties are really annoying. The health department will make us like fill in the blank. I think the uncertainty and unknown causes stress and anxiety. I know myself, when I am scared, I freeze and don't want to move forward. And we never want to hear that there's not business opportunities out there because people are afraid to ask. Remember, it's important to know that we're your taxpayer dollars at work and that we're here to serve you. And that's the ultimate goal, to serve the community. If we all work together, hopefully the farmers market can be the best that it can be. I know there's some little counties or little farmers markets or just people that set up on the side of the road. We want to make sure that everybody has equal opportunity and education information so that they can be the best they can be. We want that to be a working relationship, not just like, oh, here comes the health department. They'll get their inspection done and be out of here. Because a lot of times it's not even an inspection. The inspectors or the regulatory body will show up just to give information or educate or just review a product, make sure everything's following the guidelines so that it's just being consistent and happy for everybody. So the first thing, if you've got a big dream and you're like, this year I think I'm going to make popcorn balls. And you're like, can I make popcorn balls? So contact your health department. The farmers market will help you with a lot of things. But if you're not sure if your product is something that's going to work, reach out to your local health department in whichever county you're in or whichever city that you fall under, and they can give you guidance on that. Explain your business plan, your dreams, your ideas, get feedback from them. Feel free to ask questions. There's no silly questions. We hear everything. So make it a point to understand that the requirements related to the food items you want to sell to the public. So sometimes like this is the direction you want to take, but they can help you even expand your business by giving you some ideas like, oh, you want to sell popcorn? Well, then you could also do popcorn balls. I always think that's the ultimate food. I never see at farmers markets. Like that would be so cheap and easy to make, and you could do it with your kids. I'm throwing that idea out there for you guys. That's a freebie. So just a suggestion. It's one of those things that I'd love to see out there. Your vision. Sometimes visionaries will need to do extra research to bring a product to market. There's nothing wrong with your dream. There's nothing wrong with your vision. However, it may be an item that's not regulated by your local health department. Your product may have some recommendations for lab testing. You might be trying to sell items as a home-based vendor, but it really is a potentially hazardous food. There may be more viable modes of selling, like you could have better options selling your honey if you do it wholesale versus, as a home-based vendor. And you may just need more knowledge of what the risks are with the product that you're wanting to sell. The health department can give you guidance on all that. And I know a lot of health inspectors, they usually don't bite, and they're there for you. Types of vendors at the farmers market. So this is another thing too, like it's up to the farmers market to decide which vendors they want to allow. Sometimes the food inspector gets told, well, or, people just assume without asking that they can't do something without ever investigating further. The farmers market's required by statute to have at least 2 or more farmers or growers present, but there may be other vendors. And so I tell my regulators, like, look outside the box. Like this is the one time, do put people in boxes or baskets or pots and make sure that like you're treating them all under the code or the guidance that they need to fall under. So food establishments selling prepackaged, non-potentially hazardous food. These are maybe the children pulling around a red wagon full of soda. We're not looking at that. Girl Scout cookies, not looking at that. So once again, what do you need to inspect and what do you just need to review and make sure that the labeling is correct on? A home-based vendor, we're going to stop by your booth, review the products. If you've been into the health office to ask some questions, we're gonna be like, hi, Sally, we're here today to just look at your labeling. The retail food establishments, if there's a temporary vendor there, they are required, they've purchased their permit, and so the local health department's gonna do that inspection. Nonprofit vendors may be there. Your farmer's market may choose to allow different band boosters or stuff to be there. Once again, we don't regulate those entities. Wholesale products, if you have a wholesale product that's been inspected by the State Department of Health and it's all non-potentially hazardous, prepackaged honey, for example, I'm going to use that again. We may walk by and not regulate that or inspect it also. Crafts, entertainment, flowers, plants, your food inspector is not going to stop that. They're going to enjoy every moment of it. So permits, lots of questions about why I have to get permit. And home-based vendors, because you're not regulated, you have a separate guidance that you fall under. There's no permits. However, because it's the farmer's market, there will be retail food establishments there, and you may need to contact your local health department for those permits. People are like, why does it cost more in this county than that county? That falls under the local ordinance. And so those prices are set by your county commissioners and your county council. Like, they work together to set those ordinances. It may be totally out of your inspector's hands. It goes above their pay grade. They're just there to make sure that you are in compliance, and they're going to check to make sure you are permitted. If you go from county to county, just make sure, like, when you cross that border, that you've contacted that local health department to get your temporary permit in the county over. And then if they show up and you need a permit, most likely you can get to the office sometime within a week, but do know that you should check with your health department within 30 days to make sure you get that temporary permit if that's what your ordinance requires. The state of Indiana doesn't have a statewide permit, and that's something that a lot of people would really be interested in. It's just not an option right now. So making sure that you touch bases with all the counties that you want to go to. You know your markets, not all markets maybe are the best for your product. You know, this county's little and may not have the base of consumers that would enjoy your product. So if you want to move to another county or another area, nothing stops you. Just check with that health department. The other resource you have, I keep talking about the local health department, but the Purdue Extension Office can also assist you with questions. Those people are so great at guidance. They can give you more science. They can give you, if you want to have your product tested, they have information on that. They also have lots of fact sheets. A lot of times they can offer certification or ServSafe classes or like. So there's a lot of opportunity right there with low cost or no cost to get that information. I have listed here the different IC codes. So the big thing that came out in last year, which will be 2022, IC, the home-based vendor rule was repealed and replaced. IC 1642.53 was passed in 2022 and replaced Section 29. We use that term a lot with our home-based vendors, Section 29 vendors, but that has gone away. With that said, the new guidance has these different sections. The most recent guidance that you can get from the State Department of Health was the guidance for uniform use of House Rule Act 1149. You will see it was issued on June 16th, 2022, and you can find it on the Indiana Department of Health Food Protection homepage, but your local health department will have it, and most likely your extension office will too. Some of the captions in that area, it will go over what makes a home-based vendor, the labeling requirements. Now you can ship, and it goes into third-party shipping requirements or different recommendations. Regulatory authority, like who's going to look at what. Vendors who sell poultry and rabbits, and also the domestic chicken eggs. So, and I'm going to put a plug out there for our friends at the Indiana Egg Board. They are your friends. If you are doing domestic chicken eggs, make sure you're contacting them. So this is something I get asked, and you guys in the past, I don't think I've been very clear on this. So this was something I really wanted to explain this year. Products that may need regulations or permits from other regulators. So sometimes we have freezer meat people that want to know how they can sell freezer meat. Freezer meat, if you take your pretty pig to the market, it just needs to have a Board of Animal Health inspection. That is an inspection that's paid for by the farmer or person that wants to take their pretty pig. That gets a BOA stamp, which is like a pretty picture of the state of Indiana, and then you put it in your chest freezer and you bring it to the market. That has to be kept frozen. And so because of that, it's a freezer meat, it's potentially hazardous. You're going to be getting a local food permit from the local health department to sell those freezer meats at the farmer's market. So once again, it has to say it can't be custom exempt, it has to actually be for sale. It could also be from the USDA, but most commonly, if you're here today with Farmers Market Forum, we're talking about a BOA regulated animal, or not animal, it's a piece of meat. So make sure you contact your local health department to get that. They may require that if you have a freezer in your home, that they will come check it to make sure that it keeps temperature, that things are frozen. They may make sure that like there's nothing else in your freezer other than the freezer meat. So just be aware of that. They may be looking for some stuff, and depending on the county, they can give you that guidance. Jerky, this is one of my favorites in the great state of Indiana. Jerky is required to be either USDA or BOA stamped, inspected, done under inspection. The other way it can be done is the local can do it, and it will have a variance from the the Department of Health. That will be with a variance for a retail food establishment. So jerky is not something that a home-based vendor can do. If you know somebody that's doing them, contact your local health department. We can work with you on that. Domestic chicken eggs sold off the farm will need that Indiana board, egg board permit. All other shell eggs. Now I'm going to clarify this because this is another one that gets lots of questions. If you got any sort of birds out there clucking around and you're gathering their eggs and you want to take them to the market, contact your local health department. They're going to issue a retail food permit because that's a potentially hazardous food. So that's everything besides a domestic chicken egg. And if you're like, what's the science behind shell eggs? It all is a shell egg as far as we're concerned. However, because of Indiana code, shell eggs goes under, the domestic chicken eggs go under the egg board, and everything else goes to the local health department. So that's a great reason, once again, to call the locals. Pet food treats. So depending on the county, some counties don't look at this. However, if you want to build your business with pet treats, that would be the Office of the Indiana State Chemist at Purdue. Raw milk, not for human consumption, because we don't allow that to be sold as a human consumable. Contact them. They can get your pet permit if you choose to sell. It will have to be identified as not for human consumption. And that permit, I would recommend you have at the farmer's market or a copy of. So if the health department sees it, they can be like, oh yeah, this meets all the Office of State Chemist requirements. Farm produce, we recommend it be registered with the Indiana Department of Health. But once again, contact us on our website and we can download that registration. So it's real simple. We're free. Like, that's a great thing. Contact the Department of Health and we can get you hooked up with your produce registration, any guidance that you want for that. So there's those permits. Once again, this is for the not home-based vendors. If you want to do some of those, you're like, what do I do with this? Here's your guide to that. And I know, guys, I know that's a lot of information. You're like, wait, like this is this way and that's that way. Don't worry. And I don't want you to give up. Like, it sounds like a lot and it's not. Just like, you don't even have to make an appointment. Just go to your local health department or give them a call and they're going to help guide you through this. If they don't have an answer, if you're in a community that maybe, contact the neighbors next door. All health departments should be sharing the same information unless it's an ordinance issue. So reach out. All our regulators are here to help you grow your business. That's our goal, is to make sure you're the most successful, safe food that you can be. The home-based vendors. Now, this is something, guys, by law, by IC code, labeling is what makes you a home-based vendor. Without your labeling, you are not a home-based vendor. You're just illegal. We don't want you to be illegal. We want you to succeed. So make sure your labeling's on there. Sometimes a local health department, depending on the item, will allow you to do placarding. And I always tell the inspectors, like, just make sure it's in place. You as a home-based vendor, make sure it stays in place. Like, it doesn't, if you're allowed to placard, make sure that doesn't disappear. It needs to be on the table all during the market. So that should include whether it's stuck on there or a placard. Each home-based vendor item should have the name and address of the producer, common or usual name of the food product, the list of ingredients, including the sub-ingredients, the net weight and volume of the food product, the date on which the food product was processed. Home-based vendor products are required. And I tell people, don't play with this. Like, we want you to be the best, don't play with it. On at least 10-point font, it needs to state this: the product is home produced and processed, and the production area has not been inspected by the Department of Health. It's not for retail. We have rebranded, we're the Department of Health. However, this statement does say State Department of Health. That's what's required to be on there. So you guys, if you have any questions, no matter what, make sure that statement's on there, make sure the food's labeled properly, and usually all is good and well. Sampling, depending on the local health department, it's up to your local health department and your market organizer whether they will allow sampling. Some markets allow some sampling depending on the product. Some are like, no. If there's no potable water to be had for hand washing, or if there's no place to put wastewater for disposal, this may be a hard no. If there's no place for public restrooms are not required. It just sort of depends. Like, it totally depends on whether you as a market organizer want to allow the sampling and if the health department can work with you on that. So if you are sampling, make sure there's no bare hand contact with ready-to-eat food by the consumer or the one offering the sample. Protect the food with tongs, tissues, individual portions, or other acceptable means. I tell people, like, no, you don't have to wear the gloves. If you can use tongs instead, go for it. Whatever you can do to protect the food from being contaminated from little hands. And then sneeze guards to protect the food from consumer contamination. Guys, this doesn't have to be fancy. Like, you're not the buffet. So if you can just like put up a shield, or like just make sure that the cookies have the cover on them, whatever, work with your food inspector on that. It doesn't have to be expensive. I tell people, like, you know what, like, don't go rush out and buy like to the restaurant supply store. Like, that's not a requirement. It doesn't have to be pretty. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be expensive. It just has to work. And this, I'm going to give you all a challenge on this one. It's a temporary hand washing station. I have a lot of people that are like, oh no, the health department's going to make me pay a fortune, put up hands. I am challenging you now, $10 or less, go to the garage and find these items out there. A lot of times you can get them from a friend. All you need is a container to put warm water in. As you can see, there's a little spigot there for free flowing water. You don't want to have to hold down the pump with one hand, wave your water under the flow, and then reverse it, because that's still dirty hands. We need to be able to rub our hands together. Cheap soap, like, it can even be bar soap. Bar soap's pretty gross, but you could use it, like, just soap. That's all the requirements say. A trash can, that could be your Walmart bag hooked on, around something. And then paper towel, and then a mop bucket, like, put that mop bucket on there. So you can see, like, you shouldn't have to spend any money on this. Everything can come from home. However, not having this set up when you've been allowed to sample can be a hardship. So we would encourage people to make sure that if you are sampling or doing something, or you have a permit, that you have this in place before you operate for the day. Because I, as crazy inspector, am going to wash my hands at every single booth that has one of these to make sure it can be done. So, and that's what I recommend for my food inspectors too, is like, check and make sure you can use the hand washing, because if you can't, they can't. So once again, challenge. You may not have to spend any money on this setup, and it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to work. Food safety at the farmers market. So this is across the board. Once again, we have all sorts of vendors, but for environmental factors, just remember that it could be rainy. We've all been there. Like, it's a beautiful day, and then all of a sudden you have that downpour, or your friends at the booth next to you dump out all their cooler water, and now the stuff on the ground is soggy because your friendly neighbor. So just make sure to keep everything up off the ground. You don't know whose car dripped what fluids on that ground the day before. So once again, keep things up off the ground. The only exception on this is if you have produce that is being used for decorations. So for example, pumpkins. If you're selling pumpkins, the regulator doesn't need to know if it's for decoration or if it's for food. But once again, think that through. Like, the consumer may be buying it for pumpkin pie. Keep it off the ground if that's the case. If it's seasonal, you're doing it for decoration. It's up to you to decide if you are okay with it on the parking lot. Food safety, no matter what. So home-based vendors shouldn't be selling anything that has to be temperature monitored. However, if you are a temporary food establishment, make sure you keep hot things hot above 135 or cold below 41. On extremely hot days, guys, you all know this, like it's really hard to maintain temperatures on a hot day, especially if you're on a blacktop. That blacktop just radiates the heat, as our feet all know, like just miserable sometimes. If you're using a dorm-sized refrigerator, if you have the opportunity to do that, or you have a cooler, make sure that you're keeping the lids or the doors shut to retain the cold air. If you're lucky to have an electrical outlet to plug it in and keep it plugged in, make sure the circuits are working, and then make sure you have enough ice, and that you're keeping it drained, not on your neighbors, but keeping it so that your products aren't sitting in soggy water. And then also, if you're a retail food establishment, you're required to have an ambient air temperature thermometer on there. Most likely your food inspector is going to take temperatures of your potentially hazardous food. Once again, this is only for retail food establishments that have got a temporary permit. Even food items, if you're a home-based vendor, run into this too. You have beautiful cupcakes at the start of the market, and by the time it's 110 out, like they're not looking so pretty. You may want to make sure that you have explained to your food inspector, it's not cream cheese frosting, it's just melting icing. So you may want to keep ice on hand or keep things cold for that reason too. And that's acceptable. Just explain to your inspector, like once again, it's not cream cheese, or it's Betty Crocker. Betty Crocker, we don't care about either. So cleaning and sanitizing, once again, this is for a retail food establishment only, not required for a home-based vendor. If you can't go back to the commissary and get things, or you're not going back to commissary, make sure you're able to have a 3-bay tub, wash, rinse, sanitize. We wash the dirt off, we rinse the suds off, and we're going to sanitize to kill all the germs. And we're going to air dry. So once again, look how cheap this is. This is 3 bus tubs, 3 wash tubs, some bleach that could have came from the Dollar General, some soap, and we're not going to paper towel. We are going to like air dry things. So if you are a retail food establishment, don't forget that test kit. Bleach, we want between 50 and 100, and the quat between 200. Usually we see bleach. It's so easy to carry around. It can be cheap. It can be easy. Just make sure it's not sitting next to the food. And the inspector is going to test your water if it's already made up. So you may want to test it before the inspector gets there. The other thing to remember, once again, if you're being regulated, not home-based vendor, you may want to check that bleach water periodically. Bleach will dissipate within 4 hours in hot conditions. So you may have started out with a perfect bleach, and then it may have dissipated, and now you just have stagnant water. So keep on top of that. And then don't forget, call your local health department. If you guys, any of you, home-based vendors, produce people, temporary permits, call your health department. We're here to help. They're here to help. They can offer you helpful tips. They can answer your questions. They can give you confidence that things are going to be okay. And maybe they can give you ideas. Like I throw that all the time. Nope, cream cheese frosting is a hard no. However, Betty Crocker is not dangerous. It looks pretty. It's easy to frost with. I'm not telling you have to do that, but there's an option for you that I know that's a question I get a lot, especially with pumpkin rolls. So Betty Crocker cuts it. So I wish you best. Our whole team wishes you the best for your best 2023 farmers market season. You can always reach out to us. Once again, your locals are there for you. I don't want you to think we bite, because we don't. So if you guys have any questions, that is it. And here's my information. Feel free to email me, and I will attempt to get a hold of you in a timely manner. So once again, SHaron Pattee with the Indiana Department of Health, and I'm open for questions.
Is the Indiana HBV label not for resale new?
Yes, thank you. So that was new in 2022. The not for resale in capital letters was because otherwise you're a wholesaler. If you're selling to other entities, we want to make sure that home-based vendor is selling to directly to the consumer. And so there was a concern when that bill was passed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hey, Sharon, there's a question
Okay.
about the labeling.
Okay.
Was that just asked? And Is that a new requirement, not for resale, having it stamped not for resale?
Yeah, it was new. Like that was not on there until last year. That would have became active July 1st of last year, the not for resale. So if you've got, and I tell people, guys, if you have your pretty labels all made up and you're like, oh, no, I have to add something, you can add it to the side, like put it on, not for, have your kids sit down and put it on stickers and add it to the side. You know, I don't want a hardship with people being like, oh, now I have to redo all my labels. No, don't redo your labels, just add that to it. The
Thank
other thing
you.
I get to sometimes is when people are concerned about labeling, they're like, oh, I don't have the money for a special printer, or I don't have, time to get that together. Or the other thing is we get to the farmer's market and they're like, oh, I ran out of time to get the labels done. It is February. It's a great time to, while you're watching the Home Ec channel or True Crime or whatever you will watch, like it's a great time to get that in place so you're ready to go. First farmer's market, it's good to go. And it can be done in pencil. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be pretty. Creativity sells a product, but it just has to be there.
Thank you. We do have a question. If you can help clarify the safe food handler training requirements per the home-based vendor law for us.
Sure. So we are recommending the produce people get that. Last year, that was a real hardship and it got sprung on everybody. So the food handler certificate can be done a lot of times through the Purdue Extension and Ivy Tech. So both of those are offering it. I know I talked yesterday to Christina and she was saying how many people had reached out. It's like really not expensive. I think she said $40. I think somebody said it was $10, like depending where you are.
So
$10 online.
Yes,
So once again, we don't want it to be a hardship, but we are recommending it for produce once again. But if you are doing baked item stuff, you really need to do the certification and then turn it into your local health department so they have a copy. I would also suggest that you carry it with you. And that way, if you're going from market to market, it's not lost. I should throw that out there. I was going to intend any of these items that you're doing, you can make copies or put it on your phone. You got your food permit on your phone, get your egg board permit, you got a copy of your raw milk permit. Any of those things have on hand, especially if you have a family member that's running your stand or your multiple locations. Having that on hand, then your employee or your, a lot of times I see children running home-based vendor booths. That's totally acceptable. Just make sure that they're able to locate that documentation.
So Sharon, we do have a question about the safe food handler training and our farmers, growers that grow fruits and vegetables, producers of honey, maple syrup. I know I'm missing one. And what about people who grow mushrooms or tree nuts and legumes? Are they required to take the safe food handler class?
So they all have to have a certification no matter what, as long as they're a home-based vendor. But it doesn't have to be the certification. It doesn't have to be the certified food protection manager. It doesn't have to be serve safe. And if it's the produce, we're recommending it. The other items, I've got my director here and she's saying we want to make sure they have their certifications. I think last year, a lot of the produce people may have struggled with that. And especially different ethnic groups were being challenged by that. And we never want that to be a hardship. So, and Christina and I discussed this yesterday. When it comes to recommendations, the produce is a little bit different from those other items that would still need a certificate. Yeah, the eggs, the freezer meat, all that would still need to have a a food safety handler permit there, or not permit, certification.
Thank you for that
Yes.
clarification.
I apologize. I didn't make that clear. We just don't want the farmers penalized by getting the the food handler certificate, that would still be required for all of the home-based vendors. The
Okay.
produce certification would be for the farmers. Nope.
Okay,
Growers. Yeah, the grower, okay.
yeah,
Sorry.
the farmer growers, that's fine. That helps. And just to clarify, the Safe Food Handler is available through ServSafe online, and it's less than $15. There are other online companies that offer it for around $10 to $12. If you want an in-person training, then please check out Purdue Extension or Ivy Tech, and they offer in-person trainings, and those are going to cost a little more. Those are going to cost $40 to $50. Yeah, the ANSI accredited ones are $10.
And you can get that monthly, like there's no hardship. You can reach out even, today or tomorrow and start getting that taken care of ahead of season. So we don't want that to be a hardship this coming season. I know a lot of people that sort of got sprung on. We don't want that. Get it taken care of and you're good.
You're
And
good.
just take care of that certification with you.
Right. So there is some confusion in the chat. There is the Produce Safety Alliance Growers Training that is also available, that is very appropriate for farmers or growers that produce or grow fruits and vegetables. Would that be an appropriate training for them instead of the Safe Food Handler?
So that would not qualify. And the reason why I need to point this out is the actual legislation said it had to be ANSI approved, and that produce training is not the same. So once again, that's why I needed to clarify that a little bit. I'm glad they're asking that question. That actual legislation says ANSI approved. And because it says ANSI approved, it has to be a certified
ANSI program.
ANSI program. And it doesn't have to be ServSafe. There are other, I do want to point that out. There's other entities out there
that do teach it.
Yes. And that will certify it. And that certification will come with an ANSI seal on it. Association of, can't think, National. It has a little check mark. It's going to look like the Nike check mark. But I don't want people to go out there and think they have to take the certified food manager's course, which is good for 5 years. That is not what's being asked for.
So I am not really clear. The Safe Food Handler certificate does expire, but I've not really looked into how long that's valid for.
Oh,
is it
3 years?
Okay, thanks,
That
Sharon.
one's 3 years, no problem. That's 3 years versus the 5 years. And then I just got a note, the Produce Safety Alliance is over $90 for the home-based vendors. So it really does benefit them to go ahead and get the contact Purdue or Ivy Tech or the extension office to go ahead and get your food handler certification that way. I didn't know the price. Vivian passed me a note. Thank you, Vivian.
I like that. I'm just like, this will make scheduling easier.
Oh,
and to see like where there can be.
Sorry about that. So basically, all home-based vendors, which Sharon defined, have to have the Safe Food Handler certificate. They just need to show the certificate at any time while they're at market, and the Safe Handler certificate is good for 3 years. They can get the training online through a variety of trainers, and they shouldn't have to pay more than $15 for that. If they want to do an in-person training, it will cost up to $50. So just be aware that Purdue is does offer Safe Food Handler training, and so does Ivy Tech. So reach out to Ivy Tech and Purdue Extension for Safe Food Handler if you want in-person classes. Other than that, you can go online and take it right away, and your certificate will be good for 3 years.
The great thing about that too is the fact that in every community, there's an extension office and there's Ivy Techs. There's like over 90 Ivy Techs in the state of Indiana. So this is accessible to anybody that does need to do it in person or online if you have access to a computer, because I know there's populations out there that may not have those resources. Don't let it be a hardship. I'm not a computer techie. I like things being done in person. I feed off people's, enthusiasm and stuff. So whichever way you can train, once again, it doesn't have to be expensive. You just have to have it. Now, the law did say that once you get that, make sure you share it with your local health department. They may be keeping a database. And so also, if you go into another county, make sure you share that with them, but it has to be documented by your home county.
And also one of the questions in the chat, Sharon, was and I believe you addressed this, but if you could please clarify it for us, do poultry and egg people, like I guess along with the meat vendors at markets, also have to have the safe food handler certificate?
Yeah. They're not home-based vendors because they actually, even though like if you're a farmer, you sort of think like, oh, these are all my products. However, because those things require an actual food permit, they're not home-based vendor items. So they don't need that. They don't need the training.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Could you clarify, it only applies to whole produce, doesn't need the training, but if the produce is cut, then you need to get the food handler's training.
Right now, it's anyone, technically. We're recommending it for the produce, but the home-based vendors, if you're calling yourself a home-based vendor, you need to have the education.
Not if it's produce. That's
Right.
just recommended. But
And then the home-based vendors aren't allowed to cut produce. So it's whole uncut produce. So because of that, like, yeah.
So once you cut it, it becomes a prepared product and it has to be pH, time and temperature controlled for safety, Becky.
And so then it becomes a retail permit. So then you'd have to get that permit, which would bounce you out of being a home-based vendor.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
However, that doesn't mean that you have to be a restaurant. Just know that you can get a temporary food permit just to show up every weekend or whenever you want at your farmer's market. So just know that doesn't mean you have to have a restaurant. You can prepare everything on site, work with your local health department on that permit. And so I don't want to hold back people that want to become, like, being a home-based vendor is a great way to segue into being a restaurant if you choose to. However, if you want to get a temporary food permit, just talk to your local health department about how to start your little business right there at your farmer's market with a permit for potentially hazardous food.
So still we have some more questions. Let me see which one to address first. Sorry, it just jumped up.
I apologize because I know the certification because that is a newer piece. And that is a challenge. And I apologize because I'm not sure I'm making that very clear. So just feel free to reach out if you guys have more questions on that.
So anything that is defined as a home-based vendor, and so I can go through the list because I've gone through it quite a few times this week myself. That's anybody who does baked goods, anybody who makes confections like candies, anybody who grows fruits or vegetables and sells them at a farmer's market, anybody who does honey, maple syrup, and the other liquid. I know I'm missing one. I apologize for
Sorghum.
that. Sorghum, thank you. Anyone who does mushrooms, raises mushrooms, anyone who does tree nuts and legumes, and also in the home-based vendor law is poultry and eggs. They do require the safe food handler certificate because
And a
they're all
food permit.
considered whole-based vendors. And they may also require other certificates based on Indiana state law, which is what Sharon explained with regards to the poultry and eggs. Those are separate laws that cover poultry and eggs. So I hope that clarifies it. Sharon did a nice job setting it up, but it is confusing.
That's why I always, like, you guys, I know, like, a lot of times when we do this forum, I explained to my supervisor yesterday, manager, that Like we'd get pulled in the hallway and I'd get 20 different questions or 100 questions on products. And so always feel free. Your local health departments can help you define where each one of those fall. For example, honey had a bill that came out in 2019 that actually says like you can be retail, you can be wholesale, you can home-based vendor, but you can't be a naked honey bear. Like you can't just be there without any labeling. So you get your choice because of the Honey Bee Association, how that can be labeled, and we can walk you through all those steps.
So there is a new question, Sharon, about microgreens and sprouts.
Ooh,
Those are
that's a
very
good one.
common at farmers markets.
Yes. So I'm glad to have Vivian here. I didn't look at that. So microgreens, I believe, are with the first cut. So a lot of times people will bring them and they're going to need some refrigeration or to be on ice because they wilt real easy. You know, a lot of times we do as regulators see them, you know, in a to-go container, clear, or, you know, a clamshell. That's how we see it. It can also, people can bring the plants and do that first cut in front of you. I've seen that done sometimes. Sprouts is the actual, you have the root of the plant, it's coming up and you're buying it root and all. You're buying the sprout. And the reason that's potentially hazardous is because that root is intaking all the water, which is either contaminated or good. We don't know. We don't do water testing on these plants. So that's why sprouts are potentially hazardous versus microgreens. Microgreens is just a plant. Just like lettuce, you do that harvest cut and it's good to go.
But just to know that anybody who does grow those is considered a home and sells them at the farmer's market is considered a home-based vendor and will need to show the safe food handler certificate.
Yes.
So there is another question about fish and rabbits. What about fish and rabbits? Fish is not in the home-based vendor law.
Nope. If you want to do fish, I would recommend talk to your market organizer. We had somebody a couple years ago that wanted to actually provide the service of bringing the fish to the market and filleting the fish, which sounds like such a great idea until you're the neighbor that has to smell that all morning. Anyway, so once again, because we don't regulate fish, that we're going to leave that up to y'all to decide if you want the fish at your markets.
So there's a cool note. Thank you, Krista. Fish fall under the pet guidance, supposedly.
Yes. I tell my people, like, honestly, we do not take stethoscopes. We don't look for the time of death. So as long as it's a live animal and it's on ice, we're not going to question that. That is a live animal. The shrimp. So fish was what was mentioned, but some of our shrimp farmers come to the markets. No time of death, like put them on ice and it's a live animal.
Right. There was a
And-
question about rabbits. It was fish and rabbits. And rabbits are, it's poultry and rabbits are part of the home-based vendor law. However, they do have to follow Indiana, the state Indiana laws on how they have to be frozen at market, basically.
Yes. So they can do them fresh off the farm, but since we're talking about farmers market, they do have to be frozen at the market. I think the big concern on those chickens and rabbit being brought to the market is the fact that if it's a hot day, once again, it's hard to maintain temperature. And for food safety, being on ice and being frozen before you put it on ice is imperative. And that's why that law was written that way.
And there was a really good question in the chat about insurance requirement for home-based vendors. So the insurance requirement is not part of the health department. The insurance requirement is part of a liability, and it is required by markets, farmers markets, as part of, they are insured through, let's say, Campbell Risk Management. And because they are insured, they're requiring that all vendors that sell at their market also carry liability insurance and have to have the certificate on file with the market manager and with Campbell Risk Management. I'm just using Campbell Risk Management as an insurance company example because they're out of Indianapolis. So insurance is a totally different issue. But thank you for asking.
I think as a regulator, once again, this is not a requirement, just a tip, because I've visited lots of markets, is just making sure that you have all that organized before you get the market, because it's so easy to just, you're busy trying to get the van loaded or the car packed and the kids in. And it's so easy to leave some of that behind, and then things are questioned at the market. Just put together a little tote or a folder and always have it in place. Make copies, keep copies on your phone. So it's easily accessible and stress-free for both you and the regulator, and for, the market organizer also.
So one other question, and hopefully you can clarify this. There was some questions about, it's brewed, so beers, like microbreweries. They can be sold at market, but do you know the law that covers the microbrewery industry or the alcohol beverage industry?
So that's going to take a retail food permit, and I hope they're not brewing on site. It doesn't have to be kept cold. So just make sure they go through, that's going to be regulated through the local health department, that retail permit, and then the alcohol people, the ATC. Yeah.
Thank you. ATC. I couldn't remember that.
Yeah. If you guys are brewing on site though, I do want to see that, because that would be really interesting. I am seeing a lot of the Indiana wine producers show up, the wineries showing up at the Indiana State Fairgrounds at different events. And so if you want to sell bottles of wine, the sampling and all that's ATC again. But once again, I fully support any of our wine partners, like showing up, any of those but those Hoosier businesses, we want to support them if they want to come to the farmers market, and your market allows that.
Exactly. Because you have to be careful, because remember, anyway, markets can set those guidances for their market.
Yes.
There was a question in the chat back to poultry and rabbits sold at market. The question is, are they supposed to be whole and frozen, or can they also be butchered out? If they're butchered out, they would have to be frozen. So do you want to answer that, Sharon?
I talked to Dr. Sir about this last year for the, it's processed. Once you start cutting up that chicken or the rabbit, it's processed. And so it was sort of a given that it would be whole rabbit or chicken. I would definitely reach out to Bo if you have more questions on that, but that was her determination on, once you start cutting up the parts, it is processed.
So
I
again,
included the BOA rules on rabbit in the chat, so it is there for people to go and get and see that.
thanks, Amanda. I guess part of that is you can have a small flock of chickens, and then
1,000 birds or less. Yeah.
1,000 birds or less, and then freeze them. If you have, and they have to be frozen whole, if you have them cut up, then they have been processed in an inspected facility. So you just have to be careful. It's not like they're doing it correctly. They are actually a business. They're not a home. Anyway, I'm going to go down the wrong path here. So just be careful.
Yeah, Christina, I always sort of, as much as that is food, I do give a lot of those questions back to BOA. Last year, quail meat became a huge topic, and they were the ones that were looking into that, and they were the one that came down with no quail meat. It needed inspected. It had to have the actual BOA stamp on it. And she is able to give the plants in the different locations in the state, if anyone needs guidance on where to have their quail meat processed.
Yep, check with BOA on that. So again, there is some little bit of confusion. The Safe Food Handler is the name of a course. It is under a 4-hour training. ServSafe is one vendor that provides that training. They also provide the manager training, which is a full day training with a 80-question certification at the end, which is very difficult. The Safe Food Handler training is offered by other companies online. You just need to make sure that the company you select to take the training, to do the training with, has the ANSI certification on it. Is that?
And yes, and I want to point out, like, once again, we're not saying that you can't take the manager's class, go for it, all 80 questions and the lobster tank questions, go for it. But it's not required, guys. Like, it doesn't have to be that complicated. We don't want anyone to feel like they, have to take that class, because it's not required. Take the 3-year class,
3 hour and yeah, get it done.
be done with it, and be done with it sooner than later. Yes, it's good for 3 years.
Does that help?
I think there's still a few questions we've kind of skipped over. Just clarify so it's here on the recording. What does a produce vendor need?
Produce vendor, so they're just selling produce, only uncut produce.
Yes, whole produce. What do they need?
If they are just doing produce and nothing but produce, have them look at their, they could do the produce training.
No, the
They
safe
can,
food
but that's
handler.
not a requirement under state law, correct?
Right.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm clarifying this with my director real quick. I'm going to have her actually step in here because she works with the produce where I don't typically.
Hi, everyone. This is Vivian. So for home-based vendor only selling produce, and I mean uncut produce, they still have to comply with the food handler certificate requirement for all the home-based vendors. I hope this helps.
That's the clarification we needed. Thank you, Vivian.
Yeah, so for the Produce Safety Alliance training, I agree with Christina. That's a lot more appropriate training for growers. But because it's the cost and is not NC certified, therefore is not a requirement, but we highly encourage you to do that. And Christina actually is hosting quite a bit of produce safety training right now, and it's free of everyone to go. So if you want to learn more about produce safety, that actually included harvesting, growing, packaging, and storing. So do that and contact Christina, and it's free for everyone to do. We got a grant for it.
And Vivian is our director. She was our former produce manager before that. She's the queen of produce and knows all those questions better than I do. And we talked several times, we've discussed recommendations versus requirements. So that's the top dog. That's Miss Vivian. Thank you, Miss Vivian.
Well, we're coming up onto
You guys don't have any special products for me this year. I'm so disappointed.
any other special questions?
I think people need to take walnuts to the farmer's market. That's another one. I never see walnuts. I'm like, if they're in your yard, pick them up. Like, that's cheap and free. Like, I always try and think of things like, wow, my father is a maple syrup provider. He could have been a home-based vendor, but he wanted to get his permit just to prove that he could get permitted. Anyway, since he has a daughter that's an inspector. And so once again, all those value added things, if you guys have any questions, once again, a Sugar Shack is perfect. Just make sure those bottles aren't naked, that you have your labeling on there. No naked products out there. That's my goal for this year.
So I apologize. I accidentally sent the Zoom meeting link instead of the survey. So please do the survey. There was one last question. Tea and dried herbs. If you're selling tea and dried herbs at the farmer's market, you are considered a home-based vendor. If you're creating your own products, like repackaging them and putting them under your own label, and that means you would have to have the safe food handler training.
Yes.
Correct.
However, once again, like, guys, like, if that class only costs $15 and you are going to make a fortune with your cute little tea bags, do it. Like, there's not many safety risks. I got asked that question earlier. Herbs and teas. Like, I think that's an ingenious product. It can be packaged really cute and marketed very well with a limited cost for each home-based vendor. So totally worth it. Like, there's so many great products out there that I just hope you all, like, dive into to make your season successful this year.
And by all means, whoops. If you have any questions, Sharon will be more than glad to answer them. And we are Oh, anyway, somebody commented about pickle, sauerkraut, and kombucha.
Ooh, I knew there was some of you out there. So if you look at the 2018 guidance, we talked about those recommendations for pH meters and such. That guidance document still stands for recommendations on being able to do your pH for your inspector, making sure you have calibrated. We're really recommending that those products be done. If you're doing any of those items, they cannot be canned. Once you start canning items, we are going to it's going to take a better processing school class that would make you a retail food vendor. So not that it can't be done. It can be done as a home-based vendor. Use that 2018 guidance document. And then also it can't be canned unless you're a retail food establishment, and go through a processing class. And we will recommend, Purdue does a lovely job with that, but you can also take other classes online through other entities too. It just has to be an FDA recommended processing school.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We are up to 2 o'clock. And I just thank Sharon and Vivian for fielding all those questions for us and hanging in there with us. And if you have any questions, please feel free to email Sharon. She has her email listed
Right there.
there. And I again thank you all for joining. Please complete this survey for this session. And we were going to be taking a quick 15-minute break, and please join me at 2:15 for the People's Cooperative Market session. Thank you all.